Okay. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me, Douglas.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I got to make a confession to you before we start. I wasn't familiar with your work. So before this interview, about a half an hour ago, I Googled your name and a whole bunch of stuff came up. And one thing that I found very interesting to my delight was the Archies and all the various
hmm
Archies that you have done, which brought me back to being a kid because I think I'm older than you, but I remember as a little kid all of the Archie, the cartoons, and they used to put the singles on the back of cereal boxes that you could cut out and
Oh,
actually
yeah.
play on the turntable. What was your fascination with the Archies?
Yeah, they were one of the earliest comics I read, along with Spider-Man and different things like that. So I grew up with those. I was an avid comic book reader from very young.
And the one I particularly noticed was the Archies Meet Kiss.
hmm
What is that? Tell me a little about that story.
it's a story about the Archie characters interacting with Kiss the band, the painted face rock band, and they are comic book characters that interact with them.
Can you give us just a little bit of your backstory so maybe people other than myself who didn't know who you were?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a writer of comics and novels. I've also written podcasts and video games. A lot of my adult novels are crime fiction. I've also written a Star Wars novel, Poe Dameron Freefall. I've written a lot of comic books for many different places, my own characters, but also for Marvel and other companies. And my latest book is Araña and Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow, which is kind of a time-hopping adventure between two of the Latinx spider heroes.
So this is the latest one, and give us a little synopsis of this one.
Sure. Araña and Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow is about two Latinx spider heroes that meet for the first time in this story. Araña is a teenager in Brooklyn. She's just gained these spider abilities. She's struggling because she doesn't really have a mentor or a roadmap to be a superhero. On the other end of the spectrum in the future, Miguel O'Hara, who is the Spider-Man of that time, Spider-Man 2099, has retired from being Spider-Man after a series of tragedies, and he's decided to hang up the webs. When a supervillain called Judas Traveler steals an ancient Cuban artifact, he blasts Araña with the energy from the artifact, and that sends her hurtling into the future. The only problem is her powers are no longer working, so her first thought is, well, let me reach out to the one person I know that can help me, which is Spider-Man. Unfortunately, the Spider-Man of 2099 is very different from the Spider-Man she's familiar with, and it's really a story of these two heroes coming together, learning from each other, all in time to hopefully defeat this bigger threat before it awakens a darker evil.
Are you paid by them to write these stories, or do you write them on your own?
It's work for hire, so it's for
Okay.
Marvel.
Oh, all right. I see. Let me hit one of these talking points on your bio here. It says, "Why do you think that Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse is so appealing to young readers?"
I think the big reason is these characters are relatable. Dating back to to Spider-Man, the original Peter Parker. Whether you picked him up as a new character when he's struggling in high school and trying to balance being a hero and being a student to today, where he's an adult, balancing a career, family demands, friends, and also this great responsibility that he feels to be a superhero. And I think you see shades of that in every spider hero. The weight of responsibility and the desire to do the right thing. And I think a lot of people, not just young readers, but adults and younger kids, find that really relatable.
Is your Spider-Man character similar, or is he different than the ones we've seen in the films?
I think Araña evokes a lot of classic Spider-Man themes, but she's also very different from Peter Parker at that age. I think she's more confident and driven, and she's willing to kind of seek out the knowledge. And when Peter Parker became Spider-Man, he didn't have other spider heroes to show him the way. Spider-Man 2099 is interesting because he is in the future, so it's a whole different time. It's a much more sci-fi tone in adventure, and he's much more of the strong silent type when he's a superhero, and much more of the Joker when he's in his secret identity. Whereas Peter Parker and Spider-Man is a little bit of the inverse.
You've also written novels as well as graphic novels.
hmm
Okay. Which do you find more interesting to write or more challenging?
I think they're both interesting in different ways. You know, graphic novels are fun because you're collaborating with an artist and a letterer and a colorist and an editor, and it's very much like, you know, almost like a band playing music together, whereas a prose novel, you're really in your head for long stretches of time, and it's also a much more internal kind of narrative. You're in the character's head in a way you can't be in comics, so I think they're both really fun in different ways.
Is it similar to screenplay versus novel in the sense of word economy? Like when you're writing a graphic novel, you've got to be very particular with your wording and an economy of words. Where with a novel, you can just sort of...
Yeah, when you're writing a comic book script, you obviously, there's not, I don't want to call it a formula, but there's certain number of words you can use per balloon, a certain number of balloons you can use per panel, a certain number of panels you should have per page. And so it is much more akin to screenwriting and that kind of formatted writing. It doesn't mean it's not as narratively exciting. It can be. It's just with a novel, you really have no restraints. You could write a 300,000 word novel if you wanted to. I don't know if that would be wise, but you know, it's just the structure is different.
What was the first thing that you got published?
My first novel was Silent City, which was a private eye novel set in my hometown of Miami.
Have any of these been turned into film or TV series? Have you done any of that?
Not yet.
Is there any desire to do that on your part?
I mean, as a writer, you always are happy to have your stories, you know, adapted or, you know, given to a wider audience. So yeah, for sure.
Why did you pair Araña and Miguel O'Hara?
I think the idea was, you know, these are two of the more prominent Latinx spider heroes. And while they have interacted in the comics in terms of like big crossover events, it felt like it was the first meaningful time that it was just the two of them teaming up together. And like I said before, they're both at very different points in their superheroing career. But it's an opportunity for them to learn from each other and build a bond that maybe didn't exist before this book came out.
Was there anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, I mean, I think if you're a fan of Spider-Man, whether it's the comics or the movies or animated shows, I think there's a lot in this book for you. It's the high adventure, great characters, really fun action, and it's a good summer read, I think.
Have you done other Spider-Man comics?
I wrote a short story for Edge of Spider-Verse #1, which Marvel put out last year.
And this one is out currently?
Yes, it just came out.
Okay. Last question. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. You can find my website at alexsegura.com, and you can pick up a copy of the book wherever books are sold online, like Amazon or Bookshop, or at your favorite indie bookstore or Barnes & Noble.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Alex. Nice meeting you, and best of luck.
Likewise. Thanks, Douglas.